Initial Thoughts is a spoiler-free movie review series. All opinions are my own. Hi everyone, welcome back to Initial Thoughts, a series in which we talk about films as and when they are released. Today's film we're talking about is The Fall Guy, which is directed by David Leitch and stars Ryan Gosling and Emily Blunt. Now, do you ever get a movie that just seems to be everywhere? Not because everybody's seen it, because it's obviously just been released, but a movie that seems to be advertised so much. Like so much marketing, so many interviews and promo and media surrounding it, that you kind of feel like you have to watch it. That's how I felt with The Fall Guy. This movie seems to be everywhere. It seems to be the movie being talked about at the moment. And for that, it felt like it was worthy of being talked about as one of the bigger releases this year. Of course, you have one of the biggest actors and one of the biggest actresses from last year, Emily Blunt, in Oppenheimer, which I believe should have won Best Supporting Actress, but I digress. And Ryan Gosling, who, while I don't think he should have won Best Supporting Actor for Barbie, was certainly one of the more iconic performances of 2023. So having two massive leads on such highs in their career at the moment, and it's hard to disagree that they're two of the biggest actors working today, it's clear that this movie had certainly some star power behind it. Certainly had a lot of credibility to it, and to be honest, taking all that away, and taking away all the overhyping media and everything, I seen the trailer for this, and it looked really enjoyable. As simple as that, the trailer had me sold in this movie, forgetting everything else, and even, yes, I like Ryan Gosling a lot, he's one of my favourite actors at the moment. Emily Blunt, again, one of my favourite actresses, but it just looked like a fun premise. It looked like an enjoyable premise, and it looked like a comedy that, if done right, and that's the key point, if done right, would be really effective. So was that the case? Was The Fall Guy one of the more fun comedies of the recent times, or did it fall flat? I'm happy to report, I enjoyed this movie. I had good fun with it. I didn't think it was fantastic. I didn't think it was great, but what I did, and I think this is kind of my overarching point of this, I had a lot of fun coming out of this movie. I thought there was fun moments. I thought there was really comedic moments throughout the film. It wasn't a film that you were waiting for a laugh. It was kind of constantly enjoyable. And that really takes hold about the second act, about the middle of the movie, or maybe just before the middle part of the movie. This movie really started to hook me. And not hook me in a way of, oh my god, this story is fantastic. Because the story isn't. It's a stuntman looking for the actor that goes missing. You could probably write the actual script yourself. It's very baseline. But what this movie has, and I think the reason I enjoyed it so much, is really charismatic performances from everybody involved. And I don't just mean our two leads, I mean everybody. There is nobody here that isn't funny in at least 1 or 2 or 10 moments throughout this film. And of course, I should say that, comedy is so subjective at this point. So I may find these funny, this may tickle my funny bone, but maybe wouldn't do the same for you. That's fair enough. In the same way that I might find a horror more scary, you might say I didn't jump once or didn't get scared once. That's, I think I say that every time I talk about a comedy or a horror movie, but that's just how I felt. I genuinely did have some good laughs throughout this, and I don't mean in a way of it was a laugh a minute, but there was enough to really enjoy it, and I think overall it was a fun movie, an enjoyable movie, and a movie that isn't really made too much nowadays. And by that I mean there isn't too many comedies being made that are of this ilk. And I know obviously the genre of this type of comedy, this kind of action satire a little bit, is quite a niche subgenre of comedy. But genuinely, I have started to feel that comedy movies are on the back burner at the moment. And there's not many movies you go and get a good laugh at. And actually, tying it into one of the director David Leitch's other films, Deadpool 2. Deadpool 2 in the last kind of, what would it be? It's over 5 years ago. So say over the last decade, or maybe just under a decade, there's been a few films that have had me laughing a lot. And Deadpool 2 actually was one of them. And that wasn't essentially a kind of was, kind of wasn't a comedy. More superhero satire and parody in some ways than straight out comedy. Because comedy films don't seem to get made that much anymore. And it is strange that you know, when I think back to what, and everybody has this, especially if you're a bit older, you know, you look back in maybe the 80s and the 90s, and you have these kind of golden era comedies. For me, my golden era of comedies is kind of the late 2000s into the early 2010s, because you had things like The Hangover, Superbad, Step Brothers, 21 Jump Street, The Other Guys. I mean, I could go on. And I think if there was such a small pocket there of so many of these comedies, which shared a lot of the same tropes, but all really connected with me, and a lot of people look back on that era of comedy so fondly. But then there was such a lull in the genre. So little fun, specific comedy movies. Certainly mainstream comedy movies for a good long time. And I think it was a strange choice, especially in the, you know, kind of when we were all locked in our houses. I think a comedy would have done us good. and yes, there was a few things, and I suppose another one that actually falls into this genre, and again is by the same director and David Leitch, is Bullet Train, which is certainly a lot more recent and is very similar to The Fall Guy. Very similar in the way that it could be classed as an action film, it could be classed as, you know, a few other genre tropes, but does have a lot of comedic moments. The Fall Guy and Bullet Train are very similar in that way. And I think if you enjoyed Bullet Train for what it was, I think you'll enjoy The Fall Guy for what it is. Because there's a lot of similarities. You've got big name casts having fun, it seems, and not taking themselves too seriously in these roles. And it's clear to see, you know, that cliche that you hear when people talk about, you know, the cast was clearly having such a fun time on set. It clearly translates here in The Fall Guy. It clearly translates because you can tell that Ryan Gosling and Emily Blunt, for example, as our two leads, have so much chemistry anyway. And at this point, I think they have chemistry with everyone. When you see them on any film, they just seem to be able to bounce off actors and actresses so well. And let's talk a little bit about Ryan Gosling in particular, because I think Ryan Gosling has become possibly this generation's leading man. Oh, that's a big statement. I'm trying to think who really rivals him for that. There's certainly a few up for that mantle, but I think he's certainly a contender for it because he is such a variety actor. When I think of something like Drive or Blade Runner 2049, a very stoic, a very quiet and still performance, but a somber and emotional performance. When I look at this or The Nice Guys, which I think is one of the more underrated comedies that we've had and kind of breaks that mold of lack of comedies, lack of mainstream comedies over the last long while. I just think Ryan Gosling has so much variety to his acting chops. He has so much. He can do all the roles well, because it's hard to argue that his performance in Barbie last year, while I wasn't personally the biggest fan of the film, his performance was one of the funnier performances of the whole year last year, and that's a testament to him. But I kind of knew that already with Ryan Gosling. I knew that he had performances like this in him, because The Nice Guys, if you haven't seen that, by the way, him and Russell Crowe in The Nice Guys is brilliant, and definitely one of the more underrated comedies of the last decade. It might be even longer than that. It's a brilliant film, and it really should have got more love than it did at the time when it was released. But the one I want to talk about more is Emily Blunt, because Emily Blunt is, as I say, should have been, in my opinion, an Oscar-winning actress at this point. I thought she was absolutely fantastic in Oppenheimer, the best film last year. She was one of the core parts of that as Kitty Oppenheimer. She was a powerhouse when she had any scenes. And it's not like the film. She actually didn't get that much screen time in Oppenheimer, but every single second she stole the whole performance was just fantastic. And that's what, and the reason I bring it up is because she's such a brilliant, serious actor. I think of things like A Quiet Place Part 2, Quiet Place Part 1, I think of A Girl on the Train, I think of Edge of Tomorrow, I think of a lot of different performances by her. And I think of her as a very brilliant, serious actress. But she also might be one of the most comedic actresses working today, after seeing this. Because I actually think she might be the best part of this film. Because of course Ryan Gosling is he's our lead man in a movie where he's not actually the leading man, but he is our leading man in the movie. But it's convoluted. But Emily Blunt's performance in this is really hilarious, and I didn't think she had this kind of level of comedic performance under her belt. I didn't think she had this, and I would really like to see her in more like this. And that kind of gets me to my overall point about this movie and films like this. I'd like to see more, and trust me, if I'm being totally honest, I did enjoy this movie. I didn't love it, but I loved the idea of it. And while it didn't completely stick the landing for all points, I think I just had such an enjoyable time in the cinema watching this that I couldn't help but want more movies like this. And that's why I kind of mentioned about comedies seem to kind of being put in the back burner for a while. I would love them to really latch onto this and make movies of this ilk more and more. I said about Bullet Train, which was, last year or 2 years ago or whatever it was. Like, movies of that ilk, again, not films that I'm like, oh my god, 10 out of 10, the best film I've ever seen, because it's not. But what it is just enjoyable cinematic fun. And yes, I'm all in on the serious movies. I'm all in on, all these different emotional movies and things that really pull on the heartstrings or really have you invested. But there is an avenue that can be reached there for all audience members, which is, I just want to go to the cinema, have a laugh and go home, and not really think about it too much. And I think The Fall Guy falls perfectly into that category. I enjoyed this movie a lot, but I think I enjoyed more what this could reignite as a subgenre. It could reignite the comedy genre on a mainstream level, because of course comedies are still being made, and I don't want it to sound like, comedies have completely died a death. I just think that comedies being mainstream seems to have really stopped over this last while, and I would love that to return. Mainstream comedies with big name actors and actresses like this, I would love nothing more than that to return, because I think they're some of the most fun movie and cinematic experiences you'll have, going and having a good laugh with your friends or family at the cinema, and then going home and kind of forgetting the movie but not forgetting the laughs. That sounds really cheesy, but hopefully you get my point by that. So in summary, I would like more movies of this ilk. Not that I totally adored this film, because it did have its flaws. There was some moments where I kind of thought this story is pretty hollow. And it is. But it does make up for it in some really funny moments. And I think that's all it was, and it actually relies on some great moments, some memorable moments, and some moments that kind of throughout, and not just at the end. You go, oh yeah, that was really funny at the end when such and such happened. I think it's more, there's memorable scenes throughout this. Like when, maybe if you're like me, maybe I'm a psychopath in that way, but in some ways, or sometimes I'll sit and go, I would like to rewatch a scene from a movie. Not the whole movie, not spend, 2 or 3 hours and rewatch a whole movie, but just a scene that I really enjoyed. I think there'll be maybe 3 or 4 of that from The Fall Guy, because there's some great moments in here. But overall, a film that I didn't totally adore, but a film that I loved because of the potential of what it could bring if this does well. If this makes a lot of money, movies of this ilk I would love to see return as a genre, or as a subgenre of comedy that really, they really can be some of the more fun times in the cinema. So anyway, with all that being said, IMDb has been pretty kind to it. I'm about the same, maybe just slightly under. I'm going to go with a solid 7 out of 10. For me, it was teetering between a 7 and a 7.5. I just landed on the 7 by the end. Maybe I'm just feeling a bit harsh today. But again, this was more about not only the enjoyment I had here, but the enjoyment of movies like this. And I hope that movies like this can return on a more of a mainstream scale to this, to us, to the audience members. Is that going to happen? Probably not. Probably not. I don't know whether this movie will make a hell of a lot of money. With the amount of marketing that it's been doing, I think there's a good chance of that maybe being the case. It does make a good lot of money. But I think you've got two solid comedic performances in here, and our two leads plus the surrounding cast. A story that's pretty forgettable and pretty entry level, it feels, and I think that's the thing that hampers it the most. But as a comedy and as a cinematic experience, The Fall Guy is a lot of fun, and I would recommend, if you want to just go kind of switch your brain off a little bit and just enjoy a fun time for 2 hours, The Fall Guy is certainly that. And yeah, that has been my thoughts on The Fall Guy. I want to take this opportunity to thank you for sitting listening to me talking about yet another movie. If you want to stick around, leave a like, let me know you enjoyed this. Stick around and hit subscribe and, follow for more like this. I mean, I'm here, I'm on TikTok, I'm on Letterboxd, I'm on all the movie stuff, and I'm all the socials and all that fun stuff. If you want to follow me on any of that, or leave a like, or if this is just the one time you're watching a video, I want to say thank you. And if you do stick around, I will hopefully see you in the next one. Bye, guys.
Thanks for taking the time to watch this video. Before you go, here are some of my other videos. For updates and information on upcoming videos, the best place to find us is my Twitter. Much love, everyone.